to the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, writer, and historian. So it is Wednesday, October 7th, 2020, and we are live. So many of you all watched the vice presidential debate between Senator Kamala Harris and Vice President Mike Pence. And this is our vice presidential debate recap, analysis, and fact check. So everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in. Also, you don't want to miss this. We have a lot of fact checking on statements that were made tonight, analysis also. Follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. Turn on live notifications so you know when we go live. Share this broadcast. You don't want to miss this. I'm going to give you numerous articles to research, to read. Proper documentation ends all conversation. Okay, so we're going to jump right into this. Well, this was a better debate than the Tuesday, September 29th presidential debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. This one here, even though Mike Pence interrupted Senator Kamala Harris a number of times, and actually I saw one count. I think it was, we'll pull this up. I think he interrupted her. I think it was 11 times he interrupted her. She interrupted him 6 times, something like that. But he did a lot of lying tonight also. All right. And see, Mike Pence used to be a radio talk show host. So he's smooth and he can tell a lie and keep a straight face, but he couldn't get rid of that fly on his head as well. So one of my Facebook friends posted and said that flies land on sugar honey iced tea. So I guess that's why the fly landed on him. All right. Okay, so let's jump into this. Also, if you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN show through Cash App. $ the AHN show through Cash App, and also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. All right. Okay. So, let's give a little, update on what's going on with coronavirus, because coronavirus played a part in the discussion today. So we're at 7.5 million known cases in the U.S. We're at almost 212,000 deaths. We're at about 2.95 million people who have recovered from coronavirus also. All right. And when we look at we know early voting is going on right now in 34 states. It was reported on MSNBC tonight that 5.1 million people have voted early. Okay, in 34 states. That is an increase of 640% over this time in 2016, an increase of over 640%. When we look at coronavirus, we see that 7 states, Arkansas, Montana, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Wisconsin, and Wyoming, have set new highs for COVID-19 hospitalizations as of Tuesday, October 6th. All right. And then also we see that 34 people, abcnews.com, we posted the article on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, and my personal page, Michael Imhotep. 34 people connected to the White House are infected. At least 34 people are infected with coronavirus. You know, Donald Trump is infected with coronavirus. We know his White House press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany. We know Stephen Miller, former Governor Chris Christie. So if Donald Trump cannot protect his own staff from coronavirus and his reelection campaign, how is he going to protect 330 million people? Okay, so this is what we're looking at. Some of you all saw the Facebook post that I did during the debate because I watched the whole thing. So I'm just going to go quickly through some of the Facebook posts that I did. You all were commenting on them, and then we'll get into some of the fact checking. So towards the end, Mike Pence said, if we want a government as good as the people, something to the effect, reelect he and Trump. No, I say that if we want a government as good as the people, Trump and Pence have got to go. Hashtag vote them out. when it came to racial justice, they talked about George Floyd, they talked about Breonna Taylor. If you notice, Mike Pence, when he talked about the protests that were taking place all across the country, spearheaded by the brutal killing of George Floyd, but that was an accumulation of killings of African Americans at the hands of police. Mike Pence automatically pivoted to denouncing looting and rioting, okay, when talking about the protests. But notice he didn't denounce the white supremacists who were killing people, involved in killing people, like the Boogaloo Boys killed one police officer that was tied to one of the protests. And I said, Pence goes to looting and rioting when talking about protests, but Black Lives Matter didn't kill anyone like white supremacists did. Notice he didn't denounce the white supremacists who were involved in killing people. Okay, like and then he didn't denounce the 17-year-old boy that killed two people at the protest there in I think it was Portland. He didn't denounce that, but he denounced rioting and looting. Okay, so this is how he pivots. Pence also talked about how dealt with implicit bias as well, because he does not believe implicit bias in policing exists. And he talked about this back in 2016 on the campaign trail as well. And I told people about this when it happened. I'm going to pull up that clip because this is extremely important, because I warned people about Trump and Pence back in 2016. Many people didn't listen to me because Trump in 2016 ran on the platform of law and order. And law and order means protect white people and lock up African Americans. And if you look at the platform Trump is running on right now, he's running on law and order once again. Okay, this is a throwback to Richard Nixon. Trump is a mixture of Richard Nixon and Governor George Wallace of Alabama. All right, so then there was another post that I did on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, when they were talking about social justice. So the moderator was Susan Page of USA Today. Now, to me, she's a terrible moderator. She kept letting Pence go over. She should have stopped. See, this is what they need. They need a black mama to be the moderator, because when Pence kept going over, she would have taken her shoe off and threw it at Pence and hit him in the head. They need a black mama to be a moderator, because she kept letting Pence go over. She should have just said, time out, hold on. She at one point she said, you all agreed to the rules, your camps agreed to the rules, but she should have shut Pence down. He kept going over, and he kept interrupting Senator Kamala Harris. And a lot of women on MSNBC on the debate recap, they talked about this. And the women were talking about it, Joanne Reed and other women, Nicole Wallace. And they were talking about how women don't like it when men are interrupting them. Women are talking, trying to make their point, and men are interrupting them. Okay. So we saw that displayed tonight. But, you're dealing with this white male patriarchy, this whole thing dealing with Trump and Pence and misogynism and all different types of things like this. But when Senator Kamala Harris was talking about social justice, racial justice, I posted, why did the moderator cut off Senator Harris when she was talking about justice for black people? Because notice she was talking about that and she cut her off. I know she went over her time, but you kept letting Pence go over his time. So she's hitting it and talking about justice for African Americans. Why are you cutting her off? So some people posted, they said, well, Susan Page, she supports Trump or what have you. I don't know if it's true or not. This is one of the comments. Okay. But I just find it very interesting. Another post that I did, and we'll get to some of the fact checking here in just a second here. I want to get through some of these posts that you all were commenting on. How's everybody doing? Everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in as well. This is our vice presidential debate, recap, fact check, and analysis. Let me look at some of these other comments that I posted because you're all going crazy. The one dealing with Pence goes to looting and rioting, talking about that. They got 1,600 likes on our fan page, the African History Network. The one dealing with the moderator cutting off Senator Harris when she's talking about justice for black people, that got almost 600 likes. So they talked about Senator Amy Coney Barrett. Now, you've heard me talk about watch the presidential debate recap analysis I did September 29th, 2020. It was 2.5 hours. Okay. Hopefully this won't be 2.5 hours. Because I talked about how Trump has gotten through September 19th, he's gotten 216 federal judges confirmed. 216 federal judges confirmed. Okay. So they were talking, Pence said that he hopes Judge Barrett gets a fair hearing. I said, but Republicans didn't give a hearing to Judge Merrick Garland. This is the height of hypocrisy. You're going to sit up here and say you hope that the Senate gives gives Judge Barrett a fair hearing. The Senate controlled by Republicans, Moscow Mitch McConnell, when President Obama nominated Judge Merrick Garland as his Supreme Court nominee, Republicans in the Senate did not give Judge Merrick Garland a hearing, let alone a vote. So this is the height of hypocrisy for Mike Pence to say something like this. So then they talked about Joe Biden and President Barack Obama saving the auto industry with the bailout of General Motors and Chrysler. I live here in Detroit. That saved the auto industry. That saved 1 million jobs. Detroit would have been in really bad shape if that deal had not gone through. Senator Kamala Harris talked about how Mike Pence voted against the auto bailout. He voted against the auto bailout, but Donald Trump was against it as well, and he said so. Donald Trump said that General Motors and Chrysler, he said they should not get the bailout. They should be allowed to go bankrupt, and then they should move their plants to southern states that don't have unions, pay lower wages, and then the workers will be forced to take whatever they're being offered. Now, this is what Trump said. Okay, because I remember hearing this because we're in Detroit, the Motor City. Okay, and this is what he said back when the auto bailout took place. All right, and then okay, so those are some of the comments. All right, so let's get into some of the fact checking. How's everybody doing? Everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. We're going to give you a lot of sources here also. All right. Okay, let's jump into this. Let's look at the fact checking from the Washington Post. And I already went through and looked at some of this and printed these up. So let's look at this. Let's look at the first one, dealing with what Bob Woodward wrote in his book about Trump and coronavirus. Okay, what Bob Woodward wrote in his book about Trump and coronavirus. Now, Donald Trump's head popped up during his top secret intelligence briefing in the Oval Office on January 28, 2020, when the discussion turned to coronavirus outbreak in China. Okay, his national security advisor, Robert O'Brien, gave him a briefing January 28th, 2020. Okay, January 28th, 2020. And Bob Woodward wrote, quote, "This will be the biggest national security threat you face in your presidency." This is what National Security Advisor Robert C. O'Brien told Trump, according to the new book from Washington Post Associate Editor Bob Woodward. Quote, "This is going to be the roughest thing you face." This is going to be the roughest thing you face. Now, this was January 28th, 2020. That Trump was told this. All right. Now, Matthew Pottinger, the deputy national security advisor, agreed. He told Donald Trump that after reaching contacts in China, it was evident that the world would face a health emergency on par with the flu pandemic of 1918. That's the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918. And Donald Trump keeps saying it was 1917, but it was 1918. Okay. This flu pandemic killed an estimated 50 million people worldwide. Now, I've done an extensive broadcast dealing with that, extensive videos here on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, and my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep. You can go watch it there. It killed between 50 million and 100 people worldwide. It killed 675,000 people in the U.S. and President Woodrow Wilson at the time caught the Spanish flu as well. Okay. All right. So 10 days later, Trump called Bob Woodward and revealed that he thought the situation was far more dire than what he had been saying publicly. Okay, so this is Trump. Trump knew this. If you go check out MSNBC and look at the clip from Joanne Reed from September 9th, 2020. On her show, The Readout, Joy Reid on Trump downplaying coronavirus dangers. Your president lied to you. Okay, that's the name of the clip. Let's see if we can pull it up here. One of the segments, it talks about the February 7th call. The February 7th call between Donald Trump and Bob Woodward. Okay, and we'll pull up this clip here. Let me cue this up. Let's look at March 19th. Donald Trump said, now it's turning out it's not just old people, Bob. It's not just old people, Bob. Just today and yesterday, some startling facts came out. Is not just older. Bob Woodward said, yes. Yeah, exactly. Trump said young people too, plenty of young people. So this is March 19th. Donald Trump is talking about how he knows that young people are not immune or almost immune to coronavirus. Okay. Let's go to this clip here. I want you to hear this. I want you to hear Donald Trump in his own words. I know we don't want to hear Donald Trump, but it's important for context. I don't want you to think I'm making this up, okay? Let's go to this clip here, September 9th, 2020, from the Readout on MSNBC. This clip is entitled, Joy Reid on Trump downplaying coronavirus dangers. Your president lied to you. Played it down. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, hold on. Stuff. Oh, you couldn't hear?
Oh, really? Well, and then over the next several weeks, Trump argued exactly the opposite, that coronavirus wasn't...
Sorry, guys, let me back it up. I didn't realize I had line 2 muted. So just a second, let's back this up from the beginning. I know you couldn't hear, sorry.
Hey, Trump supporters, I know. You don't want to hear this from me. But if you can stand it, just take a minute to listen, please. Your president, the man to whom you have given your absolute devotion over the last 4 years, lied to you. In fact, Trump has been lying to all of us for practically this entire year about this virus that has killed nearly 200,000 of us and that's still killing Americans. He lied. And and a lot of people died.
Can you all hear?
Now, many of us who closely followed Trump's campaign and have taken a deep look at his history have figured out long ago that Trump was a liar and a fraud. We don't believe the stuff he says. If he tells us it's raining, we triple check before grabbing an umbrella. But you hang on to his every word. So let's just be clear. It was you that he lied to. And he didn't just lie. He acted on that lie. He's had you out there at his rallies without masks. He's had you demanding that kids go back to school, play high school and college football, when he knew since January the coronavirus could, and in nearly 200,000 cases has killed people. Oh, and there are tapes. Not tapes of anonymous sources or disgruntled former staffers. Nope, tapes of Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump not only knew that he was lying about the virus, he bragged about it in a series of interviews with Washington Post journalist Bob Woodward. According to the Washington Post reporting on Woodward's new book, Rage, Trump was warned on January 28th by National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, quote, "This will be the biggest national security threat you face in your presidency." And 10 days later, Trump called Bob Woodward on February 7th and admitted it.
It's a very tricky situation.
Indeed,
it goes through air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. You know, the touch, you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air, and that's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. This is deadly stuff.
Oh, really? Well, and then over the next several weeks, Trump argued exactly the opposite, that coronavirus wasn't worse than the flu. Oh, no way. All that risk talk was just another Democrat hoax. He minimized how dangerous this global pandemic would be in America.
But we have it so well under control. I mean, we really have done a very good job. It's a little like the regular flu that we have flu shots for. And we'll essentially have a flu shot for this in a fairly quick manner. This is a flu. This is like a flu. It's going to disappear. One day it's like a miracle. It will disappear.
Almost everybody that we see is getting better. And it could be everybody, too.
I said calm. You have to be calm. It'll go away. We're prepared, and we're doing a great job with it. And it will go away. Just stay calm. It will go away. But everybody has to be vigilant and has to be careful. But be calm.
This is March 10th.
He knew that wasn't true. And then later in March, Trump spoke to Woodward again and said the one true thing that he's managed to spit out about the virus in 9 months, that he was deliberately playing it down, that he deliberately minimized the dangers of COVID.
Now it's turning out it's not just old people, Bob. Just today and yesterday, some startling facts came out. It's not just older
exactly.
young people, to plenty of young people.
You went through a pivot on this to, oh my God, the gravity is almost inexplicable and unexplainable.
Well, I think, Bob, really, to be honest with you,
sure, I want you to.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes, sir.
Because I don't want to create a panic.
Wow. Now, of course, I must note that we don't know what came before or after each of these recordings. And, of course, today did the usual and called the book a political hit job, saying he didn't want to create panic. But to reiterate, under that quote-unquote leadership, people's lives have been ruined all over this country. Many of them people who voted for Donald Trump. More than 191,000 Americans are dead due to the virus. More than 6.3 million Americans have been infected, and more than 13 million Americans are unemployed. 8 months after he knew this virus was airborne and could kill a lot of people, Trump is still actively gathering people at rallies. And let's just be clear. These are solely for his own need to feel adulation. And he's putting his own superfans' lives at risk, including at the White House. Honestly, why would anyone do that? Why would any president? And why should anyone believe anything that he says now?
Okay, so that was from September 9th, 2020. That seems like a long time ago, but it was just last month. It seems like 2 years ago. Okay. Then September 26, 2020, you had the super spreader event at the White House. And it was formally announcing the nomination of Judge Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. And you've had a number of people who were there in the Rose Garden who now have coronavirus. Okay, Kellyanne Conway, Senator Mike Lee, Republican of Utah. There's a number of them that now have coronavirus. So you're looking at abcnews.go.com, official website of ABC News. They have this article: 34 people connected to White House, more than previously known, infected by coronavirus. Internal FEMA memo. Okay, this is from October 7th, 2020. So this is deep. All right, so let's continue here. Let's continue with the fact checking. Okay, so we have that dealing with Bob Woodward's book. Okay, next, Mike Pence claimed that Donald Trump suspended all travel from China. That's false. You've heard me talk about this before. There was an extensive article from the Washington Post from a few months ago as well that broke this down in this fact check. But Glenn Kelsler, who writes for the Washington Post and does fact checking, he said Trump suspended all travel from China. This is what Pence said. He suspended all travel from China, the second largest economy in the New World. Now Joe Biden opposed that decision. He said it was xenophobic and hysterical. All right, now Trump did not suspend all travel from China. Trump lies about this, and Pence lies about this as well. Okay, Trump did not suspend all travel from China. He barred non-U.S. citizens from traveling from China, but there were 11 exceptions. He barred non-U.S. citizens from traveling from China, but there were 11 exceptions, and Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan were not included. Okay? U.S. citizens and permanent residents could still travel from China, but were subject to screening and possible 14-day quarantines. Some flights were immediately suspended, but others continued for weeks at the discretion of the airlines. He did not just shut down all travel from China. No, he did not. Quote, all of the evidence we have indicates that travel restrictions and quarantines directed at individual countries are unlikely to keep the virus out of our borders, end quote, said Jennifer Nuzzo, Nuzzo, associate professor and senior scholar at Johns Hopkins University's Center for Health Security. She said this at a congressional hearing on February 5th, 2020. Now, it's important to note that people were still coming in from Europe, from European countries, coming into places like New York City, and some of them had coronavirus, and they were bringing it into New York City. Now, Ron Klain, who was the Ebola czar during the Obama administration, said, quote, we don't have a travel ban. We have a travel Band-Aid right now. Okay. He said this at the same hearing that took place February 5th, 2020, a congressional hearing. He added that monitoring everyone carefully, quote, is the only practical thing we can do. Now, the New York Times calculated that at least 430,000 people arrived in the United States on direct flights from China since January 1st, 2020, including nearly 40,000 in the 2 months after Trump imposed his restrictions. So the 2 months after Trump imposed his restrictions, 40,000 people still came to the U.S. from China. He did not, his China ban, he did not shut everything down. He's lying. Once again, he continues to lie, and Pence lied tonight. Moreover, screening proceedings of travelers from China have been uneven and inconsistent, the New York Times said. Some analysts at the time period, not New York Times, but back at that time, predicted that Trump's action would be ineffective at preventing the virus from taking hold in the United States. Mike Pence points to a comment by former Vice President Joe Biden, quote, "This is no time for Donald Trump's record of hysteria and xenophobia and fear-mongering to lead the way instead of science," end quote. But Joe Biden says that did not refer to the travel restrictions. He made no mention of the travel restrictions at the time he made the comment. See, this is the game Pence is running. The virus was already spreading through the United States, as there is little evidence the travel restrictions on China saved lives, especially because the Trump administration did not rapidly set up an effective testing regimen, as did many other countries. His quote unquote China ban was a China Band-Aid. It did not stop the spread. He's lying. There were 11 exceptions, and then 40,000 people, the 2 months after the ban went into effect, were still allowed to come in from China. Come on, man. Run that on somebody else. Okay? Read this from Washington Post. I have NBC News fact checking also, and New York Times. You know how we do. So we look at multiple sources, but this is stuff I already read before because I read the Washington Post and New York Times every day. You see some of the articles we post here on the African History Network. All right, how's everybody doing? Okay, so research this. We're going to give you these links here. I want you to go read this. Create tabs, create file folders in Firefox, Google Chrome. I have thousands of articles bookmarked. Okay, I have thousands of articles bookmarked. I also bookmark articles in Facebook, on Facebook. So I have numerous file folders in Facebook of articles, things like this. I have articles broken down by category as well. I do research throughout the day. So I'm just trying to see if it shows all here. Save that. Okay. All right. So let's continue here. So that deals with his fake China ban. All right. Secondly, read this article from foreignpolicy.com. This is from January 31st, 2020, from foreignpolicy.com by Laurie Garrett. Now, Laurie Garrett is an expert on pandemics. You see her sometimes on MSNBC. And you've heard me talk about this article early on dealing with coronavirus. Name of this article is "Trump Has Sabotaged America's Coronavirus Response." Trump has sabotaged America's coronavirus response as it improvises its way through a public health crisis. The United States has never been less prepared for a pandemic. This is from January 31st, 2020. This is before coronavirus got really bad. Okay. And in the excerpt here from the article, it talks about how for the United States, the answers are especially worrying because the government has intentionally rendered itself incapable. In 2018, the Trump administration fired the government's entire pandemic response chain of command, including the White House management infrastructure. In numerous phone calls and emails with key agencies across the U.S. government, the only consistent response I encountered was distressed confusion. If the United States still has a clear chain of command for pandemic response, the White House urgently needs to clarify what it is, not just for the public, but for the government itself, which largely finds itself in the dark. Now, this is January 31st, 2020. Okay? Trump has declared war on the scientists for the past 3 years. He's fired hundreds of scientists at the CDC. He dismantled the Predict pandemic team also in late 2019. Vox.com has an article on this. If you saw some of the early broadcasts I did dealing with coronavirus, because like while a lot of people were talking about Oprah and Gayle and Jada Pinkett Smith and Snoop Dogg and Kobe, all that stuff, I was studying coronavirus going back to January, and I'm looking at this thing coming. Okay. And I'm like, whoa, this is going to be something here. Now, I thought he would be more competent in handling it. Okay. I didn't know. I didn't know we were going to have an incompetent president, even worse than Woodrow Wilson was handling the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918. Read this article here from October 29th, 2019. This is from Vox.com. A crucial federal program tracking dangerous diseases is shutting down. Now, let me give you a hint. President Obama wasn't president in 2019. For all the people who just want to blame everything on President Obama, blame the black guy. A crucial federal program tracking dangerous diseases is shutting down. Predict, that was the name of the pandemic program. Predict, a pandemic preparedness program, thrived under Bush and Obama. Now it's canceled. Now, who canceled it? Trump. October 29th, 2019. Here's an excerpt of it. Let me see. Let's see. Ever since the 2005 H5N1 bird flu scare, the U.S. Agency for International Development, also known as USAID, has run a project to track and research these diseases. They talked about diseases coming from bats and rats and gorillas. The first paragraph of this article says, most of the deadliest diseases to affect humanity leap to human hosts from other animals. The 1918 flu pandemic likely came from birds. Okay, killed 675,000 Americans, killed 50 million to 100 million people worldwide. HIV likely jumped from a similar virus. There's one theory, chimpanzees and other monkeys or something like that. I don't know if that's true or not, but anyway. Recent Ebola outbreaks have come from bats, rats, and gorillas. Now, ever since the 2005 H5N1 bird flu scare, the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, has run a project to track and research these diseases called PREDICT, P-R-E-D-I-C-T, PREDICT. At a cost of $207 million during its existence, the program has collected more than 100,000 samples and found nearly 1,000 novel viruses, including a new Ebola virus. But on Friday, now this article is from October 29th, 2019. There was information in Donald Trump's presidential daily briefing warning about coronavirus going back to November and December of 2019, but he doesn't read his presidential daily briefings. Okay. This article goes on to say, but on Friday, the New York Times reported that the U.S. government is shutting down the program, the PREDICT program. According to its former director, Dennis Carroll, the program enjoyed enthusiastic support under Bush and Obama, but, quote, things got complicated, end quote, in the last few years until the program, quote, essentially collapsed, end quote. Some aspects of the program, it's unclear which, will be continued under different auspices in other departments of the government, but the core program, working with local researchers around the world to collect samples and better understand viruses in animals, is over. So we know that it's believed that coronavirus originated in bats. Read this full article. The PREDICT program was shut down in October of 2019. It goes on to say, as researchers warn that a flu like the 1918 influenza outbreak could kill as many as 50 million to 80 million people, and as new technologies alter the landscape of biology research, making it possible to study diseases in new ways, but also making dangerous research easier than ever, it's important for the U.S. government to treat pandemic risks as a serious priority, to be addressed through many different organized international programs. The cancellation of PREDICT, despite its reported shortcomings, is a step in the exact opposite direction. This is October 2019. Read this full article. Read this full article here from Vox.com. Once again, name of this article, a crucial federal program tracking dangerous diseases is shutting down. It was shut down under the Trump administration. I wonder why. Okay, because he's an idiot who's been declaring war on the scientists. This is an example of how elections have consequences. This is what I was explaining to people back in 2016. And they said, we don't need to vote. We just need to do economic empowerment, invest in the stock market. And I said, that's good, but you also need to vote for a president who's going to protect the economy that your black-owned business operates within. Okay? When Donald Trump asked black people, what the hell do you have to lose? The correct answer was everything. This is what I'm talking about. Let's continue here. Everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in also, okay? How's everybody doing? And share it on your follow us here on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep as well, okay? All right, let's continue here. So Mike Pence had some strange statements. He had some strange statistics dealing with swine flu, okay? We're going to go through and try to fact check many of their statements. Okay, so just bear with me here. When Mike Pence said when Joe Biden was vice president of the United States, not 7.5 million people contracted the swine flu. 60 million Americans contracted the swine flu. If the swine flu had been as lethal as the coronavirus in 2019 when Joe Biden was vice president, we would have lost 2 million American lives. Okay, so this is what Mike Pence said. Okay, and let's go to this here. Okay, we've got this. So this is Glenn Kessler did the fact checking on this for the Washington Post. He said this is a silly apples and oranges comparison. Because I'm listening to his numbers, I'm like, that sounds way off. Because the swine flu was not nearly as lethal as the novel coronavirus. There was not nearly as much need to halt its spread. Okay, it was not as deadly. Even with 60 million infections, there was an estimated 12,500 deaths. Even with 60 million infections, there was an estimated 12,500 deaths. Okay. And it has a note here that says that was an after the fact report based on statistical modeling of excess mortality. The actual death toll at the time was much lower. Now, a New York Times assessment in 2010 noted that some flaws in the system were discovered, but overall, the Obama administration was praised for its response to the swine flu, in part because it turned out that the pandemic was not as severe as it once had appeared. The President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology in August 2009 had forecast 30,000 to 90,000 deaths, and the final death toll was much less than that. Okay, so I wonder why Pence didn't say that. So then Pence had this claim that it was a claim of saving 50 million jobs through the PPE, the Payment Protection Program, okay, the Paycheck Protection Program. He said, we secured $4 trillion in the Congress of the United States to give direct payments to families, saved 50 million jobs through the Paycheck Protection Program. Okay. Now, this is a dubious number cooked up by the Trump administration. In fact, officials told Reuters.com, news outlet Reuters, that the number referred to jobs saved, but the total number of workers reported by businesses approved for a loan under the program. Okay. In fact, officials told Reuters that the number referred not to jobs saved, but the total number of workers reported by businesses approved for a loan program, approved for a loan under the program. Reuters said, quote, the PPP Paycheck Protection Program likely did not save 51 million jobs or anywhere close to it. Because I wonder where he got that number from, because I studied the Paycheck Protection Program. I'm like, where the hell did he get that from? 50 million jobs. The PPP likely did not save 51 million jobs or anywhere close to it, Reuters concluded after interviews with economists and an analyst of the program's data. Quote, half a dozen economists put the number of jobs saved by the initiative at only a fraction of 51 million, ranging between 1 million to 14 million. So where the hell did Mike Pence get 50 million jobs from? It's just nonsensical. But these are the type of lies that they tell. It's just nonsensical. Okay. So then we look at, you can post your comments here. We'll come to your comments here in just a minute. They talked about the Green New Deal. All right. And they talked about let's look at pre-existing conditions. Because there are 102 million people with pre-existing conditions. We talked about this September 29th at the debate recap in fact-checking analysis dealing with the presidential debate. You have one analysis showed 102 million Americans with pre-existing conditions. Okay, so Senator Kamala Harris looked into the camera addressing Americans directly, and she said, if you have a pre-existing condition, heart disease, diabetes, breast cancer, they're coming for you if you love someone who has a pre-existing condition. Now, there are a lot of African Americans with heart disease, diabetes, breast cancer. Okay. These are all underlying conditions as well. And so we know that the majority of the people who die from coronavirus, and 20% of the people who have died from coronavirus are African Americans. So you're dealing with a little more than 40,000. Okay. Many of them had pre-existing conditions. So when people say, oh, well, only people who have the overwhelming majority of people who die from coronavirus have pre-existing conditions, there's a lot of African Americans. Asthma, lupus, heart disease, kidney problems. You have to be on dialysis, diabetes, breast cancer, okay, high blood pressure. Damn, man, that's probably 80% of black people right there. So the topic at hand wasn't about health care, but Senator Kamala Harris pivoted from a question on taxes to discuss the popular Affordable Care Act. Now, Donald Trump's Attorney General, William Barr, who belongs in prison, William Barr is in court right now to repeal the entire Affordable Health Care Act, including pre-existing conditions. That case goes before the U.S. Supreme Court November 10th, 2020, 1 week after that's 1 week after the presidential election. Okay. Okay, everybody share your broadcast. How's everybody doing here? We got Sigma Don, Christine, Dwight, just a few of the people watching here on our Facebook fan page. Okay. Jeffrey, who else we have? Vernon, okay. Kat. So everybody, you can post your comments here. All right, let's continue. Let's flip back over. Okay, so Affordable Health Care Act. So William Barr is in court right now to repeal the entire Affordable Health Care Act and kick at least 20 million people off of health care. And it will also repeal pre-existing conditions. So you can't be denied health insurance because of pre-existing conditions. So VP Mike Pence responded that he liked the chance to discuss health care, stating Obamacare was a disaster. The American people remember it, and claiming the Trump administration has a plan to protect people with pre-existing conditions. They don't have a plan. They don't have, let's put it like this. They don't have a viable plan to replace it. Back in July, Trump said they were going to have a new, I think it was either June or July. Trump said they were going to have a new health care plan in like 2 weeks. June and July has come and gone. Summer has come and gone. There's no new health care plan. They're just lying. Pence responded that he liked the chance to discuss health care, stating Obamacare was a disaster. The American people remember it, and claiming the Trump administration has a plan to protect people with pre-existing conditions. He said, quote, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. Sounds like he's been listening to Reverend Al Sharpton. Pence said before changing topics, okay? Senator Kamala Harris responded, good line. Now, good line, Line. The Trump administration is currently defending a lawsuit to dismantle the entirety of the Affordable Health Care Act, which would mean all of its components, including protections for pre-existing conditions, without releasing a plan to keep that piece in place. They're trying to repeal the entire Affordable Health Care Act. Okay, that would be disastrous. This is an example of how elections have consequences. This is what I was warning people about in 2016. Okay, when people were saying we didn't have to vote and they weren't inspired to vote and all this stuff. This is nonsense. Okay, I'm flipping over to NBC News also. All right, let's continue here. Okay, so we did the fact check dealing with the 50 million jobs. Let's look at the Green New Deal. Okay, we did come in. Okay, let's look at the Green New Deal. Mike Pence said Joe Biden and Kamala Harris consistently talk about mandates, not just mandates with the coronavirus, but a government takeover of health. New Deal, all government control. Okay, now I find it interesting when you have people like Moscow Mitch McConnell, Mike Pence, Donald Trump, who talk about government taking over healthcare. But these guys have some of the best healthcare that you can get in America, and it's paid for by taxpayer dollars. Donald Trump just got experimental drugs for coronavirus that the average person can't get and doesn't know exists, paid for by taxpayer dollars. And in 2016 to 2017, he paid $750 in taxes. And in the last 15 years, he only 10 out of the last 15 years he didn't pay any taxes. Yet he has the best health care that you can get in America, paid for by taxpayer dollars. But his attorney general is in court right now to take away health care from 20 million people. These are some demons. That's why all these demons getting coronavirus, this is karma coming back on them. These are some wicked people. This is, I don't have sympathy for none of them. This is karma coming back on them. Okay, Stephen Miller, Chris Christie, all of this is the chickens coming home to roost. That's what this is. You can't inflict horror on people. You can't try to take away people's health care. You can't pass the Trump tax cut, which gave 83% of the benefits to the top 1%, add about $2 trillion to the national debt. Okay. Well, actually blew almost $2 trillion hole in the budget deficit, the annual budget deficit, added about $2 trillion to the national debt. Okay. So our children are going to be saddled with that debt and think you're going to get away with this. This is karma coming back on them. Kellyanne Conway, I don't wish harm on anybody, but this is karma. This is the chickens coming home to roost. The evil that you put out into the universe comes back on you. So, Green New Deal. So the Trump campaign for months has claimed falsely that Joe Biden's campaign platform is a mirror image of Senator Bernie Sanders. Because see, they keep trying to paint Joe Biden into a box, and they can't do it. They try to say, oh, the liberals, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Kamala Harris, they're going to pull him far to the right. They try to say for months he's for defunding the police. Joe Biden ain't for defunding the police. As a matter of fact, if we talked about this before, if you look at the op-ed that he wrote for USA Today, and we talked about this back in June. Let's see, where's that op-ed? For USA Today, where Joe Biden talks about systemic racism. This came out June 10th, 2020. Biden, we must urgently root out systemic racism from policing to housing to opportunity. And in here, he talks about how he's against defunding the police. He's for funding mental health facilities and psychologists and social workers and things like this, so that when you have somebody who's, say, homeless and mentally ill, you have a healthcare professional, a mental health care professional to respond, as opposed to necessarily somebody with a gun or only somebody with a gun. Okay. Read this because he goes through and breaks this down. We probably don't have time to get to it. Maybe I'll have time to get to a segment of it. But read this op-ed. This was from June 10th, 2020. And Trump in his commercials and on his campaign speeches at these super spreads that he keeps having, he keeps trying to say there's going to be lawlessness and disorder and rioting and looting if Joe Biden becomes president. That's taking place under your presidency right now. That's taking place under your presidency right now. Murders have increased under the Trump administration by 26%. Violent crimes are basically flat, but murders have increased 26%. We did that fact checking last Tuesday during the presidential debate. Okay. All right. Now, let's go back to the Green New Deal. Okay. Okay. So the Trump campaign for months has claimed falsely that Biden's campaign platform is a mirror image of Senator Bernie Sanders. Okay, because they're trying to tie Joe Biden to socialism, all this stuff. None of this stuff is sticking. That's simply false. Keep in mind, Joe Biden prevailed in the Democratic primary by running as a moderate alternative to Sanders' far-reaching liberal platform. So they try to say that Senator Kamala Harris is very liberal, Joe Biden's very liberal. No, they're not. They're moderates. Biden has never supported the Green New Deal, which is a non-binding resolution from Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat from New York, and other Democrats that calls for cutting carbon emissions to net zero over 10 years while making steep investments in green infrastructure. Senator Kamala Harris was an original co-sponsor of the Green New Deal resolution in the Senate, as Mike Pence, as Vice President Mike Pence said later in the debate, and has since introduced more climate legislation with Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But Biden's own climate plan is more limited, calling for net zero emissions, quote, no later than 2050, end quote, and proposing fewer green investments. The Biden campaign has not budged from this position after tapping Senator Harris to join the ticket. Similarly, on health care, Joe Biden has suggested nothing like Senator Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All proposal. On Biden's website, and people should go check out Biden's website. Check out Trump's website also. You saw we broke down Trump's 2-page platinum plan, his black agenda, platinum plan. I said it was fool's gold. Okay. His 2-page agenda for African Americans was a joke that he released 39 days before the election. We broke down Joe Biden's 22-page agenda to empower Black America. We did that May through June. It's broken into 6 parts. We did that May through June because it came out May 4th, 2020. Okay? So you can go read that at joebiden.com and go to Trump's website, read his anti-Black agenda, read his platform also. Okay, let's continue here. So whether if you similarly on healthcare, Biden has suggested nothing like Sanders' Medicare for All proposal. On Biden's website, it says if your insurance company is not doing right by you, you should have another better choice. Whether you're covered through your employer, buying your insurance on your own, or going without coverage altogether, the Biden plan will give you the choice to purchase a public health insurance option like Medicare. As in Medicare, the Biden public option will reduce costs for patients by negotiating lower prices from hospitals and other healthcare providers. It also will better coordinate among all of a patient's doctors to improve the efficacy and quality of their care and cover primary care without any co-payments. And it will bring relief to small businesses struggling to afford coverage for their employees, end quote. Now, Senator Bernie Sanders proposed a much more ambitious plan, Medicare for All or universal health care, with the government acting as the single payer. And Biden does not support that plan. All right. Okay, so that deals with the Green New Deal. Now, this is a good one here. Mike Pence. Well, let's do this. Let's go to some of your comments here quickly, and then we'll continue. This next one, Mike Pence claimed that President Obama lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs. All right. Let's look at some of your comments here. Okay, so we got Dwight. We've got, let me see, hold on. Let's secure Dwight and, okay, you can post your comments here. And let's try to monitor it here also. All right, we'll continue. All right, so let's look at this claim dealing with Pence said that Obama lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs. He said when Joe Biden was vice president, we lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs. Now, Mike Pence's statistic depends on some sleight of hand. President Obama took office. President Obama took office in the midst of the Great Recession. And thus, so many jobs were being lost every month that it makes a difference on whether you start counting the start of the term in January 2009 or February 2009. Okay, because keep in mind, remember that a new president takes the oath of office January 20th. Okay, they always take the oath of office January 20th. So a president, they said, but for the current employment statistics survey, CES, the current employment statistics survey, employers report data to the Bureau of Labor Statistics for the pay period that includes the 12th, that includes the 12th of the month before the new president takes office. So February, not January, would actually cover the first pay period after the new president took charge. February, not January, would actually cover the first pay period after the new president took charge. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is the Labor Department that calculates the unemployment rate, the job creation numbers that come out the first Friday of each month, the unemployment numbers that come out every Thursday, 8:30 a.m. Okay, so you see me post the unemployment numbers also as well. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says there is no right answer for when to start counting. Mike Pence starts with January, but if you start counting in February, President Obama over 8 years actually had a modest gain in manufacturing jobs at 4,000 manufacturing jobs. At the fact checker for Washington Post, we are dubious about the practice of measuring job growth by presidential term or presidential terms. Presidents do not create jobs. Companies and consumers do. This huge difference because of a 1 month shift simply shows how mindless and arbitrary this game can be. Okay, so a lot of people don't pick up on that sleight of hand. And when do you start counting when the president, the job numbers, when do you start attributing those job numbers to a president? Now, when Donald Trump took office, he tried to claim the numbers for January. Okay, he tried when he came in in February when the numbers came out for January. Donald Trump tried to claim that, if I remember correctly. And when he was running for president, he said the unemployment numbers were fake. He said these are fake unemployment rates. But then when he became president, he tried to claim credit for it and say that, okay, Sean Spicer was his first press secretary and said, okay, now the numbers are real. That's basically what he was saying. Now the numbers are real. Under President Obama, he said the numbers were fake, the unemployment numbers. Okay, so just pay attention to that. All right, let's continue here. Okay, so we talked about the Green New Deal. We talked about Pence claiming Obama lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs. So they got into this dispute over the Trump tax cut, the $1.4 trillion tax cut, and repealing the tax cut. Now, Mike Pence kept lying and saying that Joe Biden was going to increase taxes on basically all Americans. Joe Biden has said that if you make $400,000 or less, your taxes won't increase by 1 penny. They won't increase at all. In a sharp back and forth over tax policies, Harris and Pence disagreed over the potential impact of repealing the GOP's 2017 tax cuts. Senator Kamala Harris said on day one, Joe Biden will repeal the tax bill. He'll get rid of it. She ticked off a long list of items that a Biden administration would use the money to pay for, including education and infrastructure. On day one, Joe Biden is going to raise your taxes, Mike Pence said. It's really remarkable. He said, Mike Pence went on to say, when Joe Biden was vice president, they tried to tax and spend and regulate and bail our way back to a growing economy. President Trump cut taxes across the board. Now, Pence, reflecting the priorities of his party, said tax increases on any kind would dampen the economy. All right. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris want to raise taxes. He said they want to bury the economy. The American economy, the American comeback, is on the ballot with 4 more years of growth. He said 2021 is going to be the biggest economic year in the history of this country. It may be, but it probably be because you're not in office anymore. I'm going to try to pull up some more information on that. Just a second. Let me refresh the screen here. Okay, we'll come back to that one. We'll try to come back to that one. Just give me a minute here. Let me refresh the screens. All right. So let's look at. Let's see. Let's look at the next one here. All right. Let's scroll back down, and I have some here also that I printed up. Okay, we talked about pre-existing conditions. We talked about the 200,000 manufacturing jobs. Is that the right one? Okay, just a second here. Okay, that's. Just a second. Let's go back to. That was the wrong one. All right. So we talked. There was one from NBC News dealing with Breonna Taylor. On focus of question on racial inequality, and I posted on Facebook about this because I said why they cut off Senator Kamala Harris, why the moderator Susan Page cut off Senator Kamala Harris when they started talking about justice for Black people. Okay, notice that. And I know she went over her time, but Pence kept going over his time also. The death of Breonna Taylor, a black woman who was killed in March 13th, 2020, during the police raid at her apartment, became a focal point of tonight's debate when asked if justice was served in her case after none of the officers involved were indicted by a grand jury for murder. Senator Kamala Harris said it was not served, justice was not served, and talked broadly about the systemic racism in the country and the justice system, including the murder of George Floyd. Senator Harris said Taylor's family deserves justice. She also said Floyd was tortured and killed, and talked about the peaceful protests across the country sparked by his death. Now, we looked at the fact-checking from the Post. 93% of those protests that took place were nonviolent, were peaceful. 93% of them. Overwhelming majority of them were peaceful. Now, this Pence preempted with a rebuttal about some of the violence and rioting that took place. He also did not say justice was served in Breonna Taylor's case. Okay, we'll come back to that. Let me try to find something else here. Okay, that's dealing with pre-existing conditions. They talked about eliminating the pandemic office as well. So this deals with looking out for new pandemics. Senator Kamala Harris said they, referring to the Obama administration, created within the White House an office that basically was responsible for monitoring pandemics. They, referring to the Trump administration, got rid of it. Now, she is probably making too much of an issue about organizational charts. After grappling with the 2014 Ebola pandemic, President Barack Obama in 2000 established a Directorate for Global Health Security and Biodefense at the National Security Council, NSC, National Security Council. A directorate has its own staff, and it is headed by someone who generally reports to the National Security Advisor. The structure survived during the early part of the Trump's presidency, when the office was headed by Rear Admiral Timothy Zimmer. Now, you've heard me talk about this because Rear Admiral Timothy Zimmer was removed as the head of this global pandemic team by Trump's National Security Advisor at the time, John Bolton, okay, who refused to testify in the impeachment hearing in the House of Representatives. Then he said he'll testify in the Senate. He wasn't called in the Senate, and he was writing his book, and he came out with the book afterwards, right? Okay, that John Bolton with the mustache. But after John Bolton became Trump's third national security advisor, he decided the organizational chart was a mess and led to too many conflicts. He also thought the staff was too large, having swollen to 430 people, including staffers in the pipeline. So National Security Advisor John Bolton fired Tom Bossert, who was the Homeland Security Advisor, realigning the post to report directly to him, John Bolton. He eliminated a number of deputy national security advisors, so there was just one, and he folded the Global Health Directorate into a new one that focused on counter-proliferation and biodefense. National Security Advisor John Bolton thought there was obvious overlap between arms control, and non-proliferation, weapons of mass destruction, terrorism, and global health and biodefense, believing the epidemiology of a biological health emergency is very similar to a bioterrorism attack. Now, one key issue during such reorganizations is whether policy expertise is maintained. Luciana Borio, B-O-R-I-O, the previous director for medical and biodefense preparedness, is a practicing medical doctor and has an extensive background in medical health preparedness. She was replaced by someone with background mostly in North Korea policy. Whether having a separate office on pandemics in the White House would have made the administration react more swiftly to the emerging coronavirus threat is questionable. Quote, there isn't any organizational chart in the U.S. government that makes any difference in the Trump administration, end quote, a former administration official told the fact checker at Washington Post. Quote, Trump is more likely to say to Jared Kushner, what do you think we should do? That's the big problem. Because Jared Kushner has, even though they said that Vice President Mike Pence still heads up the coronavirus task force, but Jared Kushner plays a part in this, and at some point it seemed like he was heading up the task force. He has no experience in dealing with things like this. This guy is a real estate developer from New York. So check this one out. This is a Harris jab about Trump eliminating the pandemic office. Okay, let's look at the next one here. So we talked about taxes. We're going to come back to Breonna Taylor. We're going to look for some more information on that. Okay, in dealing with taxes, Biden says he will restore the top individual tax rate from 37 to 39.6%, raise the corporate tax rate from 21 to 28%, set minimum corporate taxes for domestic and foreign income, boost the tax on capital gains by labeling it as ordinary income and reintroduce limits on itemized deductions. As Senator Harris noted, he also vowed not to raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000 a year. You can read the rest of this dealing with taxes. Okay, it's kind of boring. Implicit bias. So Vice President Mike Pence calls suggestion of implicit bias among police an insult. Okay. And this is similar to what he was saying back during 2016, during the campaign. I'm going to try to pull this clip up here. We'll see if we can get this to play, because newsone.com has the article dealing with this, and this dealt with implicit bias in policing. So in 2016 on the campaign trail, Mike Pence said he and Donald Trump thought there was too much talk about implicit bias in policing, and they wanted to stop talking about it. Well, how do you deal with it if you don't want to talk about it? Mike Pence denial of institutional bias reveals GOP hurdles. This is from September 26, 2016. This is during the presidential election. This is 2 months before the election. Okay. Mike Pence's denial of institutional bias reveals GOP hurdles. Quote, this dismissive attitude by Mike Pence shows exactly how they feel and what a Department of Justice will be like if Trump wins, end quote, said Roland Martin, host of News One Now. This is September 26, 2016. So we look at the Trump Department of Justice. He nominated 2 attorney generals who were against criminal justice, Senator Barr Sessions III and William Barr. They backed off of the investigations into the patterns and practices of police departments because they don't hold police accountable at all. Under the Obama administration, there were more there were about 24, 25 investigations into the patterns of police, which led to 15 consent decrees. There was a consent decree with the Baltimore Police Department and the Chicago Police Department, and you had when Jeff Sessions became Attorney General, he tried to back the Department of Justice out of those consent decrees with the Baltimore Police Department and Chicago Police Department, but a federal judge would not let them do that. So this administration is totally against holding police accountable. Let's see if we can go to this clip here.
The issue of criminal. Last week in Colorado, Republican VP nominee Mike Pence, the governor of Indiana, was asked a question about the issue of criminal justice reform and what's happening with various police shootings. Check this out.
Donald Trump and I believe that there's been far too much of this talk of institutional bias or racism within law enforcement. That police officers are human beings, and in difficult and life-threatening situations, mistakes are made, and people have to be held to strict account. But we both believe that it's important that we have a president who, as the chief law enforcement officer of the United States, stands behind the men and women who serve in law enforcement.
Let me unpack that. First of all, the President of the United States is not the chief law enforcement officer.
That's the Attorney General
of the United States is the chief law enforcement officer. The President of the United States' responsibility is to be concerned about all citizens, not to stand behind police. Rakia Boyd, shot and killed by Dante Servin. He got off. Ayanna Jones in Detroit. I can go down and talk about John Crawford, shot and killed holding an air rifle in a Walmart. I can go down and list a lot of people who've been shot and killed by police that, Mike Pence, you just said police make mistakes. Death is not a mistake. Yeah. It's death. Put our panel here. This is problem. This talk. You've got racist text messages back to the school police department, racist text messages in the Florida Police Department, Klansmen on the police force, and a neo-Nazi salute in Louisiana. You have, of course, a consent decree in Cleveland. You had a report showing massive problems in the Philadelphia Police Department. Mitch Landrieu brought in the DOJ to investigate the New Orleans Police Department when he took over. I can go on and on and on. This dismissive attitude by Mike Pence shows exactly how they feel and what a Department of Justice will be like if Trump wins.
Okay, so that was September 29th, 2016. That's from News One Now with Roland Martin. I watched it live when it took place. This was 2 months before the presidential election. I saw those comments from from Pence right there. Those comments from Pence should have scared all African Americans to say, well, hold on, wait a second. Hold on. We can't let this go down. We can't let this happen. Okay? Now, that was 4 years ago. You compare that to what Pence said tonight. When asked whether Breonna Taylor, a black man, we'll post this link here. This is from news1.com. Okay. And then incidentally, Friday, October 9th, I'll make my debut on Roland Martin Unfiltered. I'll be a panelist on Roland Martin Unfiltered. You know, we share it here on our Facebook fan page. It airs Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. to like 8 p.m. So I used to guest host Roland's nationally syndicated radio show a lot. I do radio, been doing radio 10 years. I've done nationally syndicated radio, the Michael Imhotep show, but I'll be on Roland Martin Filtered as a panelist Friday, October 9th, 2020, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we'll share that broadcast also. But when this happened in September 2016, all the Black Lives Matter activists, all that, this is, hold on, wait a second. What is this right here? Because what Mike Pence said 4 years ago, that is reflective of what he said tonight. So when asked whether Breonna Taylor, a black woman killed by police in her Louisville home, received justice, Mike Pence offered sympathies to her family, but he said he trusted that justice had been served in her case. He trusted that justice had been served in her case. What justice? Where? Nobody is responsible for her murder. Quote, it really is remarkable that as a former prosecutor, you would assume that an impaneled grand jury looking at all the evidence got it wrong, end quote, Pence said. Okay? Well, but see, it was the way that Attorney General Daniel Cameron presented the information to the grand jury, because the grand jury was also asking questions. See, that came out when they released the grand jury recordings. The grand jury is asking questions. Is how Attorney General Daniel Cameron introduce the information. Now, as I talked about on our Sunday night show, because if this is your first time watching, we're here every Sunday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the African History Network show, because I do radio here in Detroit on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation WFDF here in Detroit. Right around September 9th, 2020, Donald Trump released a list of 20 20 names of potential nominees to the Supreme Court. Attorney General Daniel Cameron from Kentucky, the Attorney General who was handling the Breonna Taylor case, he was one of those names on that list from Donald Trump as a potential Supreme Court nominee. Okay? The Republicans are playing the long game. They're trying to control courts for the next 25, 30, 35, 40 years. Okay, nominating these very young, ultra-conservative, usually white males, okay, to the federal bench. So they're trying to control the federal courts while we're trying to control the basketball courts, because we don't understand this. They want to control the Supreme Court and the federal courts. And in 2016, a lot of Republicans said that the 2016 races said this is about the courts, the Supreme Court and the federal court. You had a lot of Republicans. Donald Trump was not their first choice. He wasn't their second choice. He wasn't their third choice. He wasn't their fourth choice. He wasn't their fifth choice. He was a last resort to fulfill an agenda. The agenda was get to fill the Supreme Court, to fill the federal courts with these ultra conservative, largely white male judges, very young, 36, 37, 40 years old. Okay. A lot of these are names being submitted by the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation to Donald Trump. And they wanted to in control of the U.S. Supreme Court and get Supreme Court nominations. And this is exactly what they're doing. All right, let's continue here. How's everybody doing? Okay. Cicero, Cis Raylay, Dietra. Okay, everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Okay, can you all hear me? All right, let's continue. And we'll post a link here to these articles also. Okay, so let's go back to this one. So he said it's Vice President Pence then segued to attacking the riots and violence that broke out in some cities amid otherwise peaceful protests against racial injustice. Pence told Harris it was an insult that she and Biden discuss implicit bias against African Americans. Why is that an insult? Now, keep in mind, right? A couple of weeks ago, first of all, Donald Trump is attacking the 1619 Project, right? Now, even though the 1619 Project is flawed from the New York Times, we talked about that here on the show, okay? Even though the 1619 Project is flawed, and I'm a historian, so I've talked about this before, and also Earl Scott, who's a professor at Howard University, about this as well. 1619 laid out wrong with 1619 Project, New York Times. One of the big ones is it does about the African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years ago, as my friend Dr. David Imhotep lays out in the book, First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. It deals, he talks about the Khoisan, who come from Southern Africa, have the oldest DNA on the planet, go all around the world. We see them in South America going back at least 56,000 years ago. We see them here in the U.S. going back at least 51,700 years ago. And they also don't talk about the history of the Moors as well in this country also, okay? So if we read things like Golden Age of the Moor, we read Rashidi's book on the Moors, books. So we read Golden Age of the Moor, which deals with the Moors going into Europe, the Iberian Peninsula, which is today Spain and Portugal, in 711 AD, and going all throughout Europe, civilizing Europeans, taking in the math and the science and the alchemy, or what they call chemistry, taking in the periodic tables, all different types of things, different types of foods. They're taking the teachings from the Nile Valley region of Africa, coming from ancient Kemet. They're taking that into Europe, and that's going to bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. Okay, and this is where you're going to get the foundation of the teachings that make up Freemasonry. Okay, Mason meaning son of light, and this all ties back to ancient Kemet. Okay, this is where it's coming from. They're taking the teachings from ancient Africa into Europe. This brings Europe out of the Dark Ages into the light. Light being a symbol of knowledge. So then they comes out of the Dark Ages in the 1400s. They go into the next period known as the Renaissance period, okay, which is a new awakening. But they're being brought out of the darkness into the light. Darkness symbolizing ignorance, and light symbolizing knowledge. Then you read from another friend of mine, Runoko Rashidi, brilliant historian and world traveler, Black Star: The African Presence in Early Europe, which deals with the history of the Moors in Europe as well. And one of the most famous examples of this is also Queen Charlotte Sophia, who was of African Moorish ancestry on her mother's side. And Queen Charlotte Sophia was the wife of King George III. King George III is the king that the colonialists in the 13 colonies are revolting against during the American Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1783. Okay, King George III's wife was of African ancestry, Queen Charlotte Sophia. Okay, so when we look at the Charlottesville attack that took place in August of 2017 at the Unite the Right rally, all right, and we know Heather Heyer, the white female activist, was killed. They were in Charlottesville, Virginia. Charlottesville is named after Queen Charlotte Sophia. Wouldn't the white supremacists have a fit if they found out that the city that they're in, trying to save a statue that's a statue in honor of General Robert E. Lee, the city is named after an African woman. And then when you study General Robert E. Lee, because I've done a whole presentation dealing with the history of the Confederate monuments and things like this, and the history of Confederate flags. Because what we call the Confederate flag is not really the Confederate flag. The flag that was on the Dukes of Hazzard car in the TV show The Dukes of Hazzard, that's not really the Confederate flag. That's actually the Confederate flag, the Confederate battle flag of Northern Virginia under Robert E.'s army. That's the Confederate battle flag of Northern Virginia under General Robert E.'s army. Okay, that flag, there were three flags that flew over the Confederate States of America, 1861 to 1865. That flag was never one of them. Okay, so understand this history. So a lot of people call that the Confederate flag. No, it's not the Confederate flag. All right. So you have a lot of these white people who say, oh, you know, my great great granddaddy fought for this flag or what have you. Most likely he didn't. All right. That's not the Confederate flag. But a lot of white supremacists who have that flag, things like that, don't know that. OK, so just make a long story short, because this is not a history lesson. Well, it's a history lesson, but it's not. 1619 Project. Some of the criticisms of it, some of the accurate criticisms of it is racism did not begin in 1619, because this is what it claims. Racism began in 1619. Two, not a primary cause of the American Revolution, because they claim slavery was the primary cause of the American Revolution. Three, African American history is not the story of racism and victimhood. Our is ignored, okay, because this is what they claim. The African American history is really the story of racism and victimhood. Our history is much broader than that. Okay, we can't. Our history can't be defined by victimization. Our history is much broader, more powerful. Mass incarceration did not arise from the 13th Amendment. That's a myth. That's one of the problems with documentary. The 13th Amendment of 1865. Ratified in 1865, ratified December 6, 1865, adopted December 1865. 13th Amendment is based upon what's known as the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. When it's the Library of Congress website and read the 13th Amendment, read the entire U.S. Constitution for that matter. But when it talked about involuntary servitude being prohibited unless someone was a prisoner, as somebody was a prisoner or incarcerated, what have you, convicted of a crime, duly convicted of a crime, that law already applied to white men. This is what people don't understand. That was not something created for the newly freed slaves. That law already existed for white men. What they're doing after the Civil War ends and the 13th Amendment is adopted, now it's a process of giving these rights to African Americans also. So then you go to 1866, the Civil Rights Act of 1866, more rights are being given. You go to the 4th Amendment, that citizenship is given, things like that. They're given the same rights to African Americans as white people had. That was not something that was created. That was not a loophole. No, that's a misunderstanding. And then when you study whatever people are calling mass incarceration, however the hell you want to define that, okay, that doesn't really start till early 1970s. Because the war on drugs begins with Richard Nixon's war on drugs, June 17, 1971. This is where we really see the U.S. prison population increasing. And the U.S. prison population quadruples from 1970 to 1993. It goes from about 300,000 in 1970 to 1.3 million in 1973. This is before the 94 crime bill that everybody want to talk about, but very few people have actually studied. The U.S. prison population quadruples from 1970 to 1993. How do we know? Bureau of Justice Statistics, BJS.gov. This is where you go do research on the prison populations. Bureau of Justice Statistics, BJS.gov. Go there and research that. This starts under Richard Nixon. Nixon ran on the platform of law and order, as we talked about a few minutes ago. Law and order. Nixon was a backlash to, he was basically the end of the second Reconstruction. The first Reconstruction ends with the Compromise of 1877, and Republicans agreed to the Democrats agreed to let Rutherford B. Hayes, the Republican candidate, become president if the Republicans remove the Union troops out of the South. The Union troops are in the South to protect the rights, to a certain extent, of the formerly enslaved Africans. Okay. So the Democrats want those troops removed out of the South. So this is the Compromise of 1877 that ends Reconstruction. The second Reconstruction ends with Richard Nixon in 1968, who runs on the platform of law and order, but he's a backlash to the civil rights movement. He's a backlash to the Black Power movement. He's a backlash to affirmative action, 1965, Executive Order 11246. Which is known as affirmative action. He's a backlash to all this, the Black Power movement. He's a backlash to the rebellions that were taking place in 66, 67. 1967 was known as the Long Hot Summer. Okay, and in 1967 alone, there were 159 violent uprisings in this country. 1967, there were 159 violent uprisings in this country. All of them were not on the level of a Detroit or Newark, New Jersey. Detroit explodes in July 1967. You have Newark, New Jersey. But you're going to have this taking place. Nixon is a backlash to all this, just like Trump is talking about law and order and the looting and the burning and things like this. This is what Nixon was doing in 68. And Nixon won. Law and order means protect white people and lock up black people. And in many cases, it means protect white people from black people. But see, the difference here is that because of the brutal killing of George Floyd, and it was on video and shown across the country, you had white people out. You had Hispanics out. marching with African Americans, protesting, okay, for racial justice. So that's a difference. Even though you had, the anti-war movement going on, you had African Americans and white people protesting against Vietnam, things like this. This is something on a whole nother level right here. All right. So Trump is running once again as a backlash, law and order, looting and burning. He's running as a backlash to that as well. But he's actually the president of lawlessness and disorder because he doesn't want to follow the laws. He's the president of lawlessness and disorder because he doesn't want to follow the laws. Imagine that. All right. So we have the problem with the mass incarceration did not arise from the 13th Amendment. That's false. OK, if mass incarceration arose from the 13th Amendment, then explain to me why it took 106 years for it to take place. Because I've done lectures dealing with the prison industrial complex. I've done one dealing with the history of Richard Nixon's war on drugs. We deal with Nixon's war on drugs. We deal with Ronald Reagan's war on drugs in 1982 that very few people talk about. I don't know why. OK. And so when I'm going through and looking at the chronology of this and I'm laying this out now, I hear people talking about 13th Amendment. But when I go and lay this and study this history, when you study the history, it bears something else out. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, wait a second. 1865 is here. 1971 is here. Why did it take 106 years for this mass incarceration to take place if that's why the 13th Amendment was put in place? It wasn't. It's just some more Willie Lynch bullshit. It's false. It's just like the fake Willie Lynch letter. Willie Lynch never historically existed. The letter's been proven to be a fraud. Willie Lynch letter 1712. Some of you've seen the broadcast I've done dealing with that. And I've interviewed Professor Manuel Pem, who's a history professor at Contra Costa College in California. It's a fraud. Dr. Kwabena Ashanti has come out, admitted he wrote the Willie Lynch letter in about 1970. Okay. And when you actually break down the letter, you understand sentence structure and syntax and things like that, dealing with the English language and England. Okay. Because you're talking about 1712. This is before the American Revolution. All right. The way we speak English today is not how they spoke English in 1712. It's just more nonsense. Okay. So this is why we have to study real history. All right. Our history is powerful enough. We don't have to make stuff up. This is why. Okay. Hey, if you like this type of information, also you can donate to the African History Network. $ the AHN Show through Cash App. $ the AHN Show through Cash App, and also through PayPal. PayPal.me/AHN Show. PayPal.me/the AHN Show. If you want to advertise with the African History Network, email us at customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Also, we have some new advertisers as well, so you'll hear from them also. All right, let's continue here. How's everybody doing? Write down the name of these articles here. Go read these articles as well. Okay. Knowledge is power, right? Knowledge corrects wrong behavior. I should have began the broadcast with, I may say some things that are outside the circumference of your own awareness. Just because you never heard them before, disagree with them, or don't like them, not mean that they are not true. It just means you have to do some research to understand what I'm talking about. This is why on the flyer that I did for today's broadcast, it says, as my quote, if we disagree, let's disagree based upon the facts and the evidence, not the fact that you don't want to deal with the evidence, because some people don't want to deal with the evidence. Now, the fifth problem with the 1619 Project is American history is not reducible to race and racism. American history is not reducible to race and racism. Yes, racism is part of American history. Okay, but it's not just reduced to race and racism. It's much broader than that. All right. Okay, so that was from Dr. Darrell Scott, and that was some problems with the 1619 Project. Now, there's some good information in the 1619 Project. I'm not saying don't read it, but there's some flaws with it. The flaws really have to be corrected. Now, we see that Donald Trump is attacking the 1619 Project, and we talked about this on our show a couple of weeks ago. AtlantaBlackStar.com had this article. Donald Trump, Thursday, September 17th, 2020, announced that he would establish a new commission purposed with restoring pro-American education sounds like white supremacy, to schools across the nation. Speaking from the National Archives Museum in Washington, D.C., during the first ever White House conference on American history. Donald Trump doesn't study American history unless it's Andrew Jackson, the white supremacist president, who's his favorite president, who initiated the Indian Removal Act of 1830 that pushed the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians off their land in southeastern United States and forced them on the Trail of Tears over 1,000 miles out west. And they all went into Oklahoma and took their African slaves with them also, because the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians all owned African slaves as well. This helps and then the Creek go into what they call Tallahassee in Oklahoma. Tallahassee became Tulsa, and Tulsa is where Black Wall Street is. And you're going to have, because of the Black Freedmen Indian Treaties of 1866, those African people that were enslaved by those 5 Native American nations, also called by white people the 5 civilized tribes of Native Americans, because they adopted Christianity, learned to speak English, and owned slaves. And during the Civil War, those 5 Native American nations are going to fight on behalf of the South in the Civil War to maintain slavery. Now, that's what one of my teachers, Professor James Small, as he pointed out to me, he said, the Red Tail Creek Indians did not own slaves, because you're going to have different factions of these Native American nations also. But anyway, so you're going to have African Americans who get land because of these Indian treaties, the Black Freedmen Indian Treaties of 1866 that you hear one of my teachers, Dr. Claude Anderson, talk about. All right. And when I was doing my research on the history of Black Wall Street, those treaties tie into the origins of Black Wall Street and Tulsa, Oklahoma, things like that, because Tulsa was founded by Creek Indians around 1836. And a lot of the early African-American landowners in Tulsa are going to get land from those Indian treaties. Okay, so all that history is tied together. If you read this book, this is probably one of the best books dealing with Black Wall Street. This book here by Hannibal B. Johnson. It's probably one of the best books dealing with the history of Black Wall Street. When I was doing my research, I did a 2.5-hour lecture dealing with the history of Black Wall Street, things like this. This is one of my main sources for it. Excellent book by Hannibal B. Johnson. From Riot to Renaissance in Tulsa's historic Greenwood District. Okay. And what a lot of people don't know about Black Wall Street, because I get tired of hearing people say, oh, when we had something, white people burned it down, blah, blah, blah. A lot of times we use things like white people burned down our towns, et cetera. We use that as an excuse for not having something or not building something today. African Americans rebuilt Black Wall Street after the race riot. This is what a lot of people don't know. We rebuilt it after the race riot in 1921. We rebuilt it with our own dollars because the insurance companies didn't pay out on the insurance policies for our businesses and homes. We rebuilt Black Wall Street with our own dollars. So when I deal with the history of Black Wall Street, in the Greenwood District. Greenwood District was the business district. The district started with the intersection of Greenwood, Archer, and Pine. African Americans lived in North Tulsa, which was the northern portion of Tulsa. White people lived in South Tulsa. It was the railroad tracks that separated North Tulsa from South Tulsa. But we're going to rebuild Black Wall Street in that community with our own dollars. So the most important part, the most magnificent part, the most astounding part of the story is not that we built it, is that we rebuilt it. But oftentimes we'll focus on the horror and the fact that white people came in and largely destroyed it. They didn't destroy the whole town because, see, the American Red Cross is going to set up a makeshift hospital in the Booker T. Washington High School because the high school wasn't burned down. A lot of the town was burned down, but the town wasn't just totally destroyed. No. Now, some of us just wanted to be totally destroyed to justify why many of us don't do anything today. No, it wasn't. It wasn't all destroyed. One. Two, we rebuilt it with our own money. Okay? Now, I'm against using white people's money or taxpayer dollars. I'm saying, but we couldn't get that. But we rebuilt it with our own dollars. Okay? So we have to understand this. All of our history is not tragedy and woe is me and, slave this and slave that. No. Even during slavery, there's triumph. Okay? So this is why we have to deal with real history. This is why Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr. is such a powerful book. And this is the 6th edition. When we look at page 40, chapter 2. Chapter 2 deals with, chapter 2 is, chapter 1 is the African past. Chapter 2 is called Before the Mayflower. Page 40. Now, we just talked about the Moors, the African Moors. These are African people as well. But he's talking about, see the whole way slavery, we'll get back to the fact checking, but this is dealing with history also. The whole way slavery evolves in the 13 colonies, which is then going to become the United States of America. The whole way slavery evolves is different than how we think it happened. Because August 20th, 1619 in Virginia, when those 20 and odd Africans or 20 and odd Negroes are on the White Lion slave ship, which was a pirate ship, when they're traded for food and supplies and water, codified slave laws don't exist in any of the 13 colonies. Let me repeat this. Codified slave laws did not exist in any of the 13 colonies at the time. Now, in the Spanish colonies, it existed, but the Spanish were involved in the slave trade before the English get involved. And the Spanish were bringing Africans into the territory we call Georgia and South Carolina, because it wasn't called that back then. But the Spanish are taking Africans into that territory, Georgia and South Carolina, in 1526. That's 93 years before August 20, 1619. But why don't people talk about 1526? Juan Garrido, who was born in West Africa in 1480, he comes into Florida in 1513 with the Spanish conquistador Juan Ponce de Leon. Even Dr. Henry Louis Gates, that one of my teachers, Dr. Lyndon Jeffries, calls Dr. Henry Lewis skipped the truth gates, because oftentimes he skips over the truth. Even he talks about Juan Garrido. That's 1513 in Florida. He was an African man. Okay. So Ron asked the question, was it really a race riot or was it a massacre by white people? Well, we fought back and shot back. That's another part of the story. Because, see, you had a lot of retired World War I veterans, African-American World War I veterans, that lived there in Tulsa. Okay. We shot back and fought back, but we were outnumbered. Population in North Tulsa, I think, is about 11,000. You had about, reports are about 15,000 white people that invaded that morning, early in the morning, 6:15 a.m., something like that. June 1st, 1921. So we were outnumbered, but we fought back and shot back. Not only did we fight back and shoot back, but when you go study this story, Dick Rowland was the 19-year-old boot black or shoe shine boy. And he went to get on the elevator in the office building, and the elevator was not level, and he stumbles and reaches out and grabs the arm of Sarah Page, a white girl about 17 years old, Sarah Page. She screams. People come running. They think he assaulted her. Newspaper reports blow this up. He didn't assault her. Newspaper reports blow this up. There's one newspaper report that had something to the effect that said to lynch Negro tonight. This whole thing blows up. Dick Rowland is at the sheriff's jail. There's a group of about 500 white men with guns that are there to lynch him. Take him out, lynch him. There's a group of American men that swells to about 200 who are armed. They're there to back the sheriff up and protect Dick Rowland. So oftentimes these stories are told and it's just like, we were just running scared, things like that. No, we fought back and shot back. We lived in the South. In 1900, 90% of African Americans lived in the South. We ain't live in the South because we like the heat. That was a legacy of slavery. So when you read, well, hold on, let me get to this. Then we'll go to this here in just a second. Then we'll get back to this. See, when you read books like this nonviolent stuff will get you killed. How guns made the civil rights movement possible. By Professor Charles E. Cobb Jr., who was a field secretary for SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, for 5 years in rural Mississippi. When you read books like this, then you get to like the real history of the civil rights movement. Contrary to popular belief, contrary to what Reverend Al Sharpton or Jesse Jackson or Andrew Young, okay, contrary to, or even the late Love John Lewis, okay. Okay, I love these brothers, but contrary to popular belief, civil rights movement was not a nonviolent movement. It was Negroes with guns protecting the civil rights leaders, and many of the civil rights leaders owned guns, like Fannie Lou Hamer, Rosa Parks and her husband. Dr. King owned guns until Bayard Rustin convinced him to get rid of his guns. Dr. King tried to get a concealed pistol license in Montgomery, Alabama in 1956 because he was getting death threats during the Montgomery bus boycott. See, when you read a book like this, okay, then you get the real history. African Americans grew up in we grew up in the South, we grew up in the gun culture, and we were armed, and we were protecting our communities. All right, so this is why this book is so crucial. And there are other books like this also, but this is why this book is so crucial from Professor Charles E. Cobb Jr., who's a history professor, but he was also in the civil rights movement and was a member of SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And if you saw the interview that I did with Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries, who's a nephew of one of my teachers, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, and Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries is a associate professor of history at Ohio State University, and he teaches classes dealing with the civil rights movement. We dealt with Bill Clinton's statements about Stokely Carmichael Kwame Ture at John Lewis' funeral, okay, and we dealt with how the Black Power movement comes out of SNCC in 1966. Okay, see, all this is history. The Black Power movement was the next logical step in the civil rights movement. SNCC comes out of Southern Christian Leadership Conference in about April, May 1960. And then the Black Power movement is going to come out of SNCC in 1966. This is where that element was already in SNCC before John Lewis loses the chairmanship to Kwame Ture Stokely Carmichael in 1966. So then when that happens, Lewis and a lot of the other early members of SNCC are going to leave because they're not with the Black Power movement. Okay, Diane Nash and many of them love them, but see, they weren't with the Black Power movement, so they're going to leave SNCC. But for the sake of time, page 40, 6th edition, Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr. He's talking about in the early 1600s and how codified slave laws did not exist in the 13 colonies in 1619. And in fact, when you turn to the back of the book, he has about 100 pages of milestones, landmarks and milestones in history. You go to December 1641. He says Massachusetts became the first colony to give statutory recognition to slavery. Massachusetts became the first colony to give statutory recognition to slavery. That was in December 1641. Massachusetts was the first colony to have codified slave laws. The laws are coming to different colonies at different times. The way we misunderstand history is to think that whole system of slavery just existed when those Africans get off the White Lion slave ship, Lion, the White Lion slave ship in 1619. No, it didn't. Not in the British colonies. Spanish colonies, yes. Portuguese colonies, yes. Because the Portuguese are the first ones involved in the transatlantic slave trade. They get involved in 1441, and they're going to dominate the transatlantic slave trade for about the first 200 years. Different European nations are getting involved at different times. Okay? So other colonies followed. Connecticut, 1650. This is when the codified slave laws, statutory slave laws come to Connecticut. Virginia, 1661, 1663. New York and New Jersey, 1664. South Carolina, 1682. Rhode Island and Pennsylvania, 1700. North Carolina, 1715. Georgia, 1750. And those 29 Africans, they're put into a form of indentured servitude. They're going to be released after about 3 to 5 years. All right. But here's what it says. Of all the improbable aspects of this situation, the oddest to modern blacks and whites is that white people did not seem to know they were white. Because in the English colonies at this time, this whole concept of whiteness doesn't really exist. And we're largely going to see this after Bacon's Rebellion in 1675 and 1676 in the colony of Virginia. And Bacon's Rebellion, just make a long story short, Bacon's Rebellion was a rebellion where you had white indentured servants and enslaved Africans. They're going to unite because they realized they had a common oppressor. And it's largely going to be after this that, at least in the English colonies here in this land, in the English colonies, that this real concept of whiteness is going to be introduced about 1680, 1681 to break up the alliance between what we call the white indentured servants or English indentured servants and the enslaved Africans. To break up that alliance, you're going to really have this concept of whiteness introduced about 1680, 1681. Of all the improbable aspects of this situation, the oddest to modern blacks and whites is that white people did not seem to know that they were white. It appears from surviving evidence that the first white colonists had no concept of themselves as white people. The legal documents identified whites as Englishmen and or Christians. This is how, in general, in the English colonies, they're going to identify themselves. This is the early 1600s. The word white, with its burden of arrogance and biological pride, developed late in the century, late in the 17th century, which would be late in the 1600s. Is going to develop late in the century as a direct result of slavery and the organized debasement of blacks. The same point can be made from the other side of the line. For a long time in colonial America, there was no legal name to focus white anxiety. The first blacks were called blackamoors, Moors, Negers, Negers, and Negars, Negars. The word Negro, which is Spanish and Portuguese term for black, or it can mean a black thing, did not come into general use in Virginia until the later part of the century, meaning the later part of the 17th century. Okay, read this. Read Before the Mayflower is a really, really good book by Lerone Bennett Jr. It's page 46 edition. Okay, let's continue here. So Trump is attacking the 1619 Project, all this. And he threatened to, in California, he threatened to defund school districts in California that were using, because there's a curriculum also for the 1619 Project for it to be taught in school. He said, we must clear away the twisted web of lies in our schools and classrooms and teach our children the magnificent truth about our country. Okay, so he's attacking New York Times. Read this article here. But he also attacked the diversity training, anti-racism training, things like that. He also attacked that as well. Because he signed an executive order to end that in federal agencies, the diversity training, implicit bias training, all different types of things like this. Of tools to counter the narrative elections. People don't. I listen to some things. People just many of our people. The vote didn't matter. Why do Republicans work so hard to suppress the African American vote? Okay, it's because they understand how important the vote is, how powerful it is. And when we look at the protesting, most of what they're protesting has to do with at laws, with elected officials, or putting place people who were all right, so let's continue here. All right, let's continue. All right, everybody, share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in also. We'll be here for a little while longer. Okay, so Pence calls suggestion of implicit bias among policing an insult. So he's going to go on to say the presumption that you hear consistently from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris that America is systemically racist, that he believes that law enforcement has an implicit bias against minorities, is a great insult to the men and women who serve in law enforcement. This is what Mike Pence said, which echoes what he said back in 2016 in that clip that I played from new.com. Okay, so pandemic, existing conditions. All right, I want to show you all a couple of articles here. I'll read these. This deals with this. These are from June 2020. And also from newsone.com. The name of that article from newsone.com is Mike Pence denial of institutional bias reveals GOP hurdles. That's from September 26, 2016. Trump's plan to end Obama's peaceful reforms and unshackle the police succeeded. NewYorkMag.com. This is from June 2020. Trump's plan to end Obama's peaceful reforms and unshackle police succeeded. Came out when you had the protests surrounding George Floyd, because that was in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Bob Kroll, Kroll, is the president of the Minneapolis Police Union. Here he is in 2019 at a Donald Trump rally, shaking hands with Donald Trump, wearing a T-shirt that says "Cops for Trump." Now, he's the head of the Minneapolis Police Union. Okay. Last October, Minneapolis Police Union President Bob Kroll appeared at a Trump rally, clad in his red "Cops for Trump" T-shirt. Kroll, who has been alleged to be affiliated with white supremacists, gloated that the president had unshackled his officers from the restraints imposed by Trump's predecessor, which was Barack Obama. Unshackled his officers from the restraints imposed by Trump's predecessor. Bob Kroll, the president of the Minneapolis Police Union, said, quote, "The Obama administration and the handcrashing of police was despicable," he told the crowd at this Trump rally. He said the first thing President Trump did when he took office was turn that around, got rid of the Holder Loretta Lynch regime, and decided to start taking letting the cops do their job, put their handcuffs on the criminals instead of us, end quote. The article goes, we will never know if that tackling of the police emboldened Officer Derek Chauvin and released on $1 million to murder George Floyd. But the line between chief demand Bob Crawl on behalf of Minneapolis police and the naked assassination committed on camera by one of his officers is quite direct. The world around us, in which the streets of every major American city are filled with protesters, is the result of Trump granting the wishes of the most retrograde police officers. They are getting what they asked for. The last few years of the Obama administration were one of the most productive periods of criminal justice reform in American history. Now, why are people talking about this? Because I keep hearing people talk about Obama ain't do this, Obama ain't do that. No, Trump has reversed over 200 policies from the Obama administration. Trump has unshackled the police. This is why Trump, Attorney General William Barr, his first Attorney General Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, this is why they ain't really talk about holding police accountable. This is why a lot of police unions support Trump. Because you had many police, not all police officers, okay? There are approximately 800,000 police officers, about 18,500 police departments. But you had a lot of police officers. You had many police unions who said that the administration and Black Lives Matter were declaring a war. Was not the case. The Obama administration was working to hold police accountable. Now, the majority of control over police is at the local level and city. That ties into the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which gives states rights. The last few years of the Obama administration were one of the most productive periods of criminal justice reform in American history. The administration sentencing guidelines to reduce the disparity in the treatment of drug crimes that had disproportionately harmed Black defendants. Why aren't people talking about that? Because President Obama, I think it was 2010, he signed a bill that was passed by Congress to reduce the disparity in crack cocaine from 100 to 1 to 18 to 1. Trump runs the champion of criminal justice reform. No, he's not. Trump reversed the initiative from August 2016 from the Obama administration not to renew federal contracts for privatized prisons because Trump was supported by privatized prisons. He was supported financially by privatized prisons in the 2018 campaign, specifically Core Civic and Geo Group, which are two of the largest owner-operators prisons. Then when he gets in office, he reverses that initiative from the Obama administration because privatized prisons were losing money under the Obama administration because the U.S. prison population dropped to its lowest point in 20 years in December 2015, as reported by the Department of Justice report that came out December 2016, as documented in the article from Newsweek.com that talks about how the U.S. prison population is at 1.5 million. Why aren't people talking about this? The Obama administration changed sentencing guidelines to reduce the disparity in the treatment of drug crimes that had disproportionately harmed Black defendants. As part of an effort to inculcate a, quote, guardian, not a warrior, end quote, mindset, it restricted the transfer of surplus military equipment to police departments. That was something that came out of the protests in Ferguson, Missouri. Protesters, Black Lives Matter protesters, they said that police don't need to have military grade equipment. Okay. So President Obama, I think it was an executive order. Okay. They had an executive order. I don't think it passed Congress. I think it was an executive order not to give military grade equipment to police departments. Guess what happened when Trump came to office? He reversed it. As part of an effort to inculcate a quote guardian, not a warrior, end quote mindset, because this was coming out of the Obama 21st Century on Policing Task Force, and how there needed to be a change in the culture of policing and a change from a warrior mentality to a guardian mentality, a guardian of the people, as opposed to being a war, as opposed to having to come into people's community and be a warrior. They need to be a guardian to protect the people in the community. Okay. So one of the things that the 21st Century Task Force on Policing was doing was focusing on changing that culture when it comes to policing. Now, because it's federal and because of states' rights, they can make recommendations for most of those things. They can make recommendations. They couldn't mandate it in general. Certain things that pass Congress, the legislative branch of government, U.S. House of Representatives, U.S. can be signed into law by the president to be an actual law. It restricted the transfer of surplus military equipment to police departments. Most importantly, it formed consent decrees that we talked about with more than a dozen police departments, it's about 14 or 15, to force them to change their practices. These reforms did not root out brutality and racism. They were mild both in form and intent, undertaken with the goal of conciliating police and their communities, believing that enhancing trust would ultimately create safer conditions for police as well as those who fear them. It was the epitome of evolutionary cultural change. It was the epitome of evolutionary cultural change. This was the context for Trump's nightmarish claims in 2016 that cities were being overtaken by bloodshed and carnage, like he's saying now. But it's happening under his watch. Whatever wisps of data he could cite to support his rhetoric, Trump was drawing a picture borrowed from the imaginations of resentful police who experienced Obama's carefully drawn nudges as intolerable oppression. He reversed them swiftly, referring to Trump. Trump's first Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, ended the restriction on transferring military equipment to police, reviewed all consent decrees struck by his predecessor, and then restricted their use going forward. Quote, it is not the responsibility of the federal government to manage non-federal law enforcement agencies, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III said. When Attorney General William Barr took over for Jeff Sessions, whom Donald Trump fired for refusing to violate Justice Department guidelines, there was nothing left of the Obama reforms to undo. Still, Attorney General William Barr continued to rail against the specter of criminal justice reform. But I thought Donald Trump was supposed to be the champion of criminal justice reform. But you nominate two attorney generals who are against criminal justice reform. Attorney General William Barr presented the reform movement, now confined to local officials, as a civilizational threat. Attorney General William Barr presented the reform movement, now confined to local officials, as a civilizational threat. Quote, there is another development that is demoralizing the law enforcement and dangerous to public safety, Attorney General William Barr railed in August 2019. Quote, that is the emergence in some of our large cities of district attorneys that style themselves as social justice reformers, social justice reformers, who spend their time undercutting the police, letting criminals off the hook, and refusing to enforce the law. So Attorney General William Barr is at odds with a lot of the progressive DAs, like Marilyn Mosby in Baltimore, Kim Foxx in Chicago, Kim Gardner in St. Louis. The Attorney General William Barr, who's against criminal justice reform, is at odds with a lot of these progressive DAs who are elected by the people to do the right thing and hold police accountable. In another, even more unhinged speech 2 months later, Attorney General William Barr warned, quote, if communities don't give police that support and respect, they might find themselves without the police protection they need, end quote. The enthusiastic assent of both Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III and Attorney General William Barr indicates how broadly reflective Trump's agenda is within his party. Trump's hatred of criminal justice reform is not just bleating from an old racist who still thinks the Central Park Five were guilty. It is party doctrine. We just saw it displayed on the debate stage with Mike Pence's comments dealing with implicit bias and Breonna Taylor. And it was not enough for Trump and his supporters merely to uproot the seedling of criminal justice reform. Trump felt obliged as well to clamp down on peaceful protests. When Colin Kaepernick took a knee during the national anthem to protest police brutality, Trump intimidated owners into blacklisting him, Kaepernick, from their rosters and even boasting of his success. Read the rest of this article. This is from NewYorkMag.com. Trump's plan to end Obama's peaceful reforms and unshackle the police succeeded. Now, this article came out before Trump, one, threatened to use the 1807 Insurrection Act, okay, against protesters in the street. Two, before in Washington, D.C., he used military police or what have you to move protesters so he could walk across the street to the church and hold the Bible upside down. He's turning the police and things like this on largely peaceful protesters. This is what dictators do. June 1st, 2020, TheGuardian.com. Anger as local police union chief calls George Floyd a violent criminal. Anger as local police union chief calls George Floyd a violent criminal. The president of the Minneapolis Police Union has written to its members calling George Floyd a violent criminal, describing those protesting over his death as terrorists and criticizing the city's political leadership for not authorizing greater use of force to stop the rioting. The letter drew a swift rebuke from a former Minneapolis police chief who called it a disgrace. Lieutenant Bob Crawl, president of the Police Officers Federation of Minneapolis, this guy here who was wearing the Cops for Trump shirt at a Trump rally in 2019, that's Lieutenant Bob Crawl, who called George Floyd a violent criminal. Lieutenant Bob Crawl, president of the Police Officers Federation of Minneapolis, defended the 4 officers involved in George Floyd's death, including Officer Derek Chauvin, who knelt on Floyd's neck for more than 8 minutes. He said, Lieutenant Bob Crawl said, quote, "What is not being told is the violent criminal history of George Floyd. The media would not air this. I've worked with the 4 defense attorneys that are representing each of our 4 terminated individuals under criminal investigation, in addition with our labor attorneys to fight for their jobs. They were terminated without due process," wrote Lieutenant Bob Crawl president of the Police Officers Federation of Minneapolis, according to a copy of the letter obtained by the Star Tribune. Read the rest of this article. It's 3 pages. I don't have time to get through all this. Elections have consequences. We're not anti-police. We're anti-police brutality. We're anti-racial profiling and against implicit bias in policing. Okay, so we have that from The Guardian. Anger as local police union chief calls George Floyd a violent criminal. He's Lieutenant Bob Crawl, Trump supporter. Okay, that's another. Okay. I don't have anything to do. And then this is a big article from New York Times, how police unions became such powerful opponents to reform efforts. New York Times, June 6, 2020, how police unions became such powerful opponents to reform efforts. Half a decade after a spate of officer-involved deaths inspired widespread protests, many police unions are digging in to defend members, just like Lieutenant Bob Crawl did. So read this. This is like a 9-page article. Read this from the New York Times, okay? Let's see here. All right, that's enough. I mean, I have thousands of articles, but you get the point. Literally, I have thousands of articles. I got like 6 stacks of them to my left. All right, so we have that. Okay, we went through all this from the Washington Post, most of it what I wanted to get through. And let's see who we have here. Anything else that I need to get through? All right, everybody all right? You can hear me okay? We got through all that. And we'll do some more of this on our Sunday night show, the African History Network show. Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We broadcast on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, and my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, and we're on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation WFDF. Let's look at some of your quick comments here. We'll talk some more about this. You know, we cover we cover politics, we deal with history, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, love, sex, health issues. We cover the presidential race as well. If you like this type of information, hit the thumbs up button also. And you can also donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, and also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. Okay, let me check. Let me just check my notes, make sure I got everything that I wanted to cover before we get out of here. We got that. I think that was the main thing that I wanted to cover. Read the article from Newsweek.com that deals with, there's a couple articles on the share. Newsweek.com, it deals with the U.S. prison population dropping to its lowest point in 20 years. This article is from 2016, I think it is. This deals with the U.S. prison population. Then also News1.com has a good article dealing with the incarceration rate of African Americans, how it fell under the Obama administration. Nobody wants to talk about that either. This one here from News1.com as well. All right, look, we're going to get out of here. Thanks for tuning in to our vice presidential debate recap, fact check, and analysis. Hope you read these articles. Hopefully this information will help you. It's not about the political party. It's not about the personality. It's about the policies. I'm neither ducking. Okay. Politics is the distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinance, adoption, interpretation, enforcement. Politics impacts every aspect of our lives, from the water we drink to the air we breathe to the food we eat. So if you saw the different policies they were talking about and the laws, and they were talking about how it impacted people, we see how all this impacts us. And I'm all for economic empowerment and entrepreneurship. My degree's in business administration. I taught entrepreneurship for 7 years, help people start businesses, help people get funding for businesses. I did business consulting for 7 years, managed the African-American business consulting firm. I managed companies where we had African-American owned companies where we had contracts with the city of Detroit, county of Wayne, state of Michigan. So I understand the role also that government plays as well. Okay. The role that government plays also when it comes to entrepreneurship. Government laws, policies help to shape the economic environment that your Black-owned business operates within. So in 2016, you had some people who said, we don't need to vote. We just need to do economic empowerment and invest in the stock market. I said, that's good. But we need to vote also because we need to, one, elect a president who's going to protect the economy that our Black-owned businesses operate within. And then also, when I teach about this whole concept, 6 principles of political self-defense, understanding how laws and policies impact the economic conditions of African Americans. And we'll talk about this in some later broadcast, but just to go through it briefly. One, we have to look at which candidate policies are going to best benefit African Americans. 2, whose policies are going to do the least amount of harm to African Americans. Also, we have to look at whose policies are the most realistic to take place, whose policies are the most feasible, most realistic. Okay? Who will protect the gains that we've made, who will protect the policies that are in place that are benefiting us already. Because there are always people trying to take away policies that benefit you. So who's going to protect your gains? All right. Also, it's very important. A lot of people talk about we want a Black agenda. We want a Black agenda. Well, one, a Black agenda is not what candidates present to us. That's what we present to the candidates. But that comes out of understanding history, politics, law, and actually being able to put together an agenda. And the Black agenda, African American agenda, gives us a yardstick to measure the candidates by, and it deals with what our issues are so we can see how a candidate's issues measure up. The most important thing to identify is not the candidate with the Black agenda. The most important thing to identify is the candidate with the Black agenda. Because the anti-Black agenda is even worse than not having a Black agenda. This is what a lot of people don't talk about. See, it's one thing not to have necessarily a Black agenda, but you're not trying to do African Americans harm. Your policies will benefit. They're non-specific, but they'll benefit. When you talk about increasing federal minimum wage to $15 an hour, that's going to disproportionately benefit African Americans because African American men make about 79 cents on every dollar that the average white male makes. African American women make 61 cents for every dollar that makes. Black woman hates is usually in August of each year because it takes the average African American woman 20 months to make the same amount of money that the average white in 12 months. And in some states, like African American women make 47 cents on the dollar compared to a white male. Okay, so if you have a candidate that's pushing for raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour, that's not a ceiling, that's a floor. Well, that benefits African Americans. You may not have specific policies, but that still benefits us. Okay. Now, when you have somebody that has an anti-agenda, they have policies that are purposely designed to hurt you. So the first thing we have to do is identify the candidates with the anti-Black agenda and make damn sure they don't get in office. See, this is why a candidate with an anti-Black agenda is worse than one that doesn't have a Black agenda. One that doesn't have a Black agenda, you may be able to push them in the right direction to get some things accomplished. The one with the anti-Black agenda, you're not going to be able to do that. And they're trying to take away what you have and actually do you harm. So it's not always about what a candidate can do for you. It's also understanding how to block what people are trying to do to you. This is understanding principles of political self-defense. Okay. So also we have to elect candidates and finance candidates who want to create an environment for us to push our agenda the farthest and get the most accomplished. When we look at Angela Davis says she's supporting Joe Biden, not because she loves Joe Biden, not because Joe Biden is perfect. She said Joe Biden can be pressured the most so we can get the most from him. She said Joe Biden can be pressured the most, not Trump. So it's understanding who can be pushed the farthest to get the most accomplished. We have to leverage our economics to enforce our political agenda as well. And who could be pushed the most to get, who could be pushed the farthest in the right direction to get the most accomplished. Okay. All right. And then also we had to stop financing our own dehumanization. Stop financing our own dehumanization. So let me give you an example. A lot of people talk about privatized prisons. Not only about 8% of the prisons in the U.S. are privatized prisons now, but we saw in October 2019, Governor Gavin Newsom in the state of California signed a bill that passed the state legislature to abolish privatized prisons in the state of California. Well, a lot of people are invested in privatized prisons and don't know it. They're invested through their 401k plan or pension fund dollars. Now, I'm not against 401k plans and pension funds. I'm not saying get rid of them. I'm saying you can call your benefits manager, find out where your money is invested, and divest from privatized prisons. Where do we see an example of this? City of New York, June of 2017. The city employees in the city of New York found out had $48 million invested in privatized prisons. Okay. And that money. They say you can't have privatized prisons, but you're not going to do it with our money. This is an example of us financing our own dehumanization. Many people don't know that they're invested in privatized prisons. One, two, they don't know that they divest their pension fund dollars, okay, from privatized prisons. Also, something else we need to investigate. Many of us are invested either through 401k plans or pension funds in entertainment companies that put out negative corporate controlled hip hop. This is something we need to divest from because we're financing our own dehumanization. All right. So, all right. We got to get out of here. Remember, the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. Hopefully you learned something from this vice presidential debate recap, fact check, and analysis. All right, so we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. Remember, right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. And we'll talk to you next time. Peace. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. Click on the like button, click on the follow button, turn on notifications so you know when we go live. Also, follow us on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep on YouTube, and turn on notifications there as well. All right, this time.